Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. Chris sat alone on the swings, dragging his feet in the dirt as he watched the other kids play tag. Their laughter and shouts filled the playground, but Chris couldn't bring himself to join in. Ever since kindergarten, he had struggled to connect with the boys in his class. Their roughhousing and rowdy games didn't appeal to him like they did the other boys. Chris preferred quieter activities, like drawing or reading. The only real friends he had were girls. He got along easily with them, bonding over dolls and make-believe games. But the older he got, the more the other boys excluded him. Chris wasn't interested in sports or trucks or superheroes. He didn't understand their jokes or relate to their boasting. The divide between Chris and the boys only grew wider as they got older. In middle school, Chris started to dread gym class most of all. The locker room was filled with shouts, sweat, and a musky smell he hated. Chris changed quickly, keeping his eyes down to avoid the other boys' prying glances. More than once, he found himself shoved into a locker, the boys' raucous laughter echoing down the hall. Their taunts followed him too: loser, wimp, even gay. Words that stung even if Chris didn't fully understand them. All he knew was that he didn't fit in, no matter how hard he tried. At home, Chris confided in his older sister Julia about his struggles. She was always willing to listen without judgment.
"I just wish I could find friends who understand me,"
Chris said one day as they sat in the treehouse out back. Julia gave him a sympathetic smile. "I know it's hard being different, but you'll find your people one day. Just stay true to yourself." Chris hoped she was right. As high school approached, he vowed to make more of an effort. Maybe if he pushed himself out of his comfort zone, he could find a way to connect with the other boys. On the first day of 9th grade, Chris arrived early and scouted the halls for familiar faces. He spotted a group of boys from his middle school: Brandon, Luke, and Matt. Taking a deep breath, he approached them.
"Hey guys, mind if I join you?"
The words came out timidly. The boys glanced at each other in surprise.
Sure, I guess so,"
Brandon replied. An awkward silence followed.
"So, how were your summers?"
Chris asked, trying to spark conversation. The boys shrugged and muttered brief replies. Chris could feel them sizing him up. His palms grew sweaty, but he was determined to see this through. "You guys want to hang at lunch? I could use some help finding my classes too," he said with an encouraging smile.
"Sorry, dude, we're gonna be busy catching up. Just the guys," Matt said casually.
The dismissal stung, but Chris didn't let it show.
"No problem. See you around,"
he said, turning quickly so they wouldn't see the hurt in his eyes. So much for putting himself out there. As Chris made his way to homeroom, he vowed not to repeat that humiliation. If the boys didn't want him around, fine. He didn't need them anyway. Over the next few weeks, Chris kept to himself. He ate lunch alone, ducking out quickly after so he wouldn't have to endure the boisterous cafeteria. He sat in the back during classes, avoiding eye contact. The few times he was forced to interact with boys for group projects, he kept conversation to a minimum. One day after gym class, Chris lingered in the locker room until everyone had cleared out. As he changed, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, all gangly limbs and awkward angles. His t-shirt and basketball shorts hung loosely on his slender frame. Chris frowned, suddenly despising what he saw. Why couldn't he just fit in like the other guys? Their broad shoulders and muscular builds let them command any room they walked into. Next to them, Chris felt weak, invisible, less than. A deep ache of frustration welled up in his chest. He blinked back angry tears, not wanting anyone to see him cry. No, he refused to be weak anymore. He had to change something. From that moment on, Chris started observing the popular guys more closely. He noticed how they walked with a confident swagger, chins held high, how their booming voices and raucous laughter drew all eyes to them, the way they moved through the halls like they owned the place. Chris started mimicking their behavior little by little. He practiced deeper vocal tones when responding in class. He held his head high and pulled his shoulders back when walking down the hall. He even changed his wardrobe, ditching the jeans and t-shirts for basketball shorts and muscle shirts. His family noticed the shift in his demeanor. "What's going on with you?" Julia asked one evening. "You've been acting different lately." Chris shrugged. "Just trying something new." In truth, he was still struggling inside. His bravado felt like an ill-fitting costume. But if this is what it took to gain acceptance, then so be it. At his next basketball tryouts, Chris channeled the cocky energy he'd seen from the other players. To his surprise, his confidence paid off. The coach took note of his improvement, and Chris made the JV team. Finally, he was making progress. As Chris spent more time with his teammates, he started to learn their vernacular and laugh at their crude jokes. Their playful punches that once annoyed him soon became a symbol of brotherhood. One day after practice, some of the guys invited Chris to play video games at Matt's house. He jumped at the chance to continue connecting with them off the court. Matt led them to the basement where a big screen TV was set up. Brandon and Luke grabbed controllers and flopped onto the couch. An open seat remained next to them. "You gonna just stand there, dude? Grab a controller," Brandon said. Chris sat down tentatively. He chose a first-person shooter game and tried to keep up with the banter flowing between the others. Their trash talk and bellowing laughter filled the room as they became engrossed in the game. For the first time, Chris felt included.
Headshot! You guys suck!
Matt exclaimed.
Whatever, you just got lucky,
Chris shot back. The others howled in response. Chris smiled, savoring the acceptance. As the night wore on, their rowdy energy amplified. Brandon cracked open a few beers he had smuggled from his dad's garage fridge. Chris hesitated at first, but accepted the offer. He didn't want to rock the boat now that he'd made progress fitting in.
Chug it, bro,
Luke egged him on. Chris guzzled his beer, ignoring the bitter taste. Soon they were all drunk and boisterous.
Let's prank call the pizza place,
Matt suggested. They all laughed as he phoned in a ridiculous order, disguising his voice. Their reckless behavior emboldened Chris.
I've got an idea, he said. Let's TP Coach's house. He was totally unfair about my playing time last game.
The others whooped in agreement. In a blur of drunken excitement, they grabbed a case of toilet paper and headed out. Under the cover of night, they draped Coach's trees and bushes with streams of white. The four of them stumbled back to Matt's afterwards, congratulating each other on the perfect prank. Chris rode home that night feeling on top of the world. Hanging with the guys had unlocked a new sense of confidence and belonging. He couldn't wait to tell Julia about his victory. But the next morning, Chris awoke to his parents' angry voices downstairs. He crept to the top of the stairs and listened.
The school just called. Coach's house was vandalized last night. They think Chris was involved,
his dad said heatedly. There must be some mistake. Chris knows better than that, his mom replied. His dad sighed.
I don't know. He's been acting out lately. I knew that new friends group was trouble.
Chris's heart sank. Just when he'd found acceptance, it was all crashing down. Over the next few days, the truth about the prank came out. Chris confessed, as did the others. They were all suspended from the basketball team. His parents grounded Chris for a month, but their disappointment hurt more than any punishment. Chris could see the concern in their eyes each time they looked at him, the unspoken fear that they were losing their son. One night, Julia knocked softly on Chris's bedroom door. He opened it, expecting another lecture, but instead she gave him a sympathetic look. Rough week, huh? Chris nodded glumly.
Want to talk about it?
She asked. Chris hesitated, then opened the door wider to let her in. They sat on his bed as Chris recounted how desperately he had wanted to fit in, the lengths he went to change himself, how it had all backfired. Julia listened quietly as Chris shared his struggles. When he finished, she reached out and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry you felt like you had to change yourself to fit in, she said gently. But those guys clearly weren't real friends if they only accepted the fake version of you. Chris looked down, nodding. I just wanted so badly to be one of them. His voice dropped to a whisper. But the truth is, I've never felt like one of the guys. He glanced up nervously at Julia. Her expression remained open and non-judgmental. Chris took a shaky breath and continued.
Since I was little, I've always related more to girls. I preferred playing house and dolls over getting rough on the playground. I just feel more comfortable around other girls.
Chris's eyes welled up with tears.
But I tried to ignore those feelings. I thought if I just acted tougher, more masculine, it would make the confusion go away.
Julia reached out and wiped a stray tear from his cheek.
Hey, it's okay. Your feelings are normal. Lots of kids feel uncertainty about who they are. You mean, you don't think I'm weird?
Chris asked hesitantly.
Julia shook her head. Not at all. We all deserve to be our true selves.
Chris let out a sigh of relief. It felt cathartic to finally voice the feelings he'd buried away for so long.
I've never admitted this out loud before, but deep down I think I feel like a girl, he confessed. When I imagine my future, I envision myself as female, wearing dresses and makeup. And the idea makes me really happy.
Saying the words out loud lifted a huge weight from Chris's chest.
Julia smiled and squeezed his hand again.
Thank you for telling me. That kind of self-awareness takes a lot of courage. They talked late into the night as Chris opened up about the signs he'd tried to ignore over the years. His preference for female friendships, envying his sister's clothes and toys, the foreign discomfort he felt in his changing male body. Julia listened with compassion, letting Chris share at his own pace. She asked thoughtful questions, but didn't push. Chris had never felt so accepted. Over the next few weeks, he and Julia had more heart-to-hearts. They researched topics like gender identity and transitioning. The more Chris learned, the more certain he became about embracing his female identity. One afternoon, they sat browsing a thrift store's dress section. Chris's eyes lit up as he lingered over the floral prints and silky fabrics.
Why don't you try something on?
Julia suggested. Chris glanced around nervously.
Really? Here in the store? Of course. I'll stand guard outside the dressing room, don't worry.
With trembling hands, Chris chose a knee-length sundress with a ruffled skirt. Safely hidden behind the dressing room door, he took a deep breath and slid the dress over his head. The soft fabric hugged his slender frame in all the right places. Chris turned side to side, admiring how the skirt swished around his legs. He felt beautiful, whole. Julia's voice called out gently.
How's it going in there? Want to come out and show me?
Chris hesitated, heart pounding. This was uncharted territory, but he trusted Julia completely. He stepped out shyly. Julia's face lit up. Oh, wow. You look amazing. It's totally your color. Chris's cheeks flushed. You really think so?
Absolutely. You're glowing.
Chris grinned, blinking back happy tears. He twirled in front of the mirror, feeling genuinely comfortable in his skin for the first time. That dress marked a turning point. Soon, trips to the thrift store became a regular ritual for Chris and Julia. Makeup, accessories, and feminine styles of all varieties. Chris soaked it all in, embracing this long-suppressed part of himself. The next milestone came a few weeks later, his first sleepover with friends as his true self. Julia helped Chris plan a girls' night with two of their most open-minded friends, Jess and Mira. The evening started off with nervous excitement as the four of them holed up in Julia's bedroom with snacks. Chris had come out to them earlier that week, and they'd responded with wholehearted acceptance. Still, it was all so new. But as the night went on, Chris relaxed into the giggling energy of the group. They gave each other pedicures and facials, topics ranging from gossip to philosophy. For the first time, Chris didn't have to filter his thoughts or guard his body language. He could simply be.
Your eyeshadow is gorgeous. Where did you learn to blend like that?
Jess asked as they compared makeup techniques. Chris smiled, relishing the girlish bonding. The night was filled with countless firsts, pillow fights, deep girl talks, even slow dancing together as their favorite songs played, and the most precious, first of all, hearing his new name, Christine, whispered with the giggling awe of a slumber party secret. As Chris, now Christine, grew more comfortable in her identity, she knew it was time to share the truth with her parents. Julia coached her on how to start the conversation, giving tips to keep it a dialogue. On a quiet Saturday, Christine approached her mom in the kitchen. "Hey, Mom, could we talk for a bit? There's something important I want to share with you and Dad." Her mom lowered the dish she'd been washing and turned to face her. "Of course, honey." They sat down at the kitchen table. Christine's leg bounced nervously under the table. She started slowly, opening up about the isolation she'd always felt from other boys. Her sense that something was different inside. The soul-deep realization that she identified as female. The words came out in stops and starts. Her mom listened intently, letting Christine speak without interruption. As she neared the end, Christine's eyes filled with anxious tears. "So, that's what I've been dealing with," she concluded, voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's probably confusing, but being true to myself would make me really happy." She finally met her mom's gaze. There were tears in her mom's eyes too, but with an angry face. Christine's heart sank as she saw the anger flash across her mom's face. This was not the reaction she had hoped for. "Mom, please," she started, but her mom held up a hand to stop her. "Christine, I don't even know what to say right now. This is a lot to take in." Her mom's voice was tight, controlled. Christine's lower lip trembled. "I'm still the same person, Mom. I just want to be true to who I am." Her mom shook her head sharply. "This is too much. I can't deal with this right now." She stood up from the table, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We'll talk later, after your father and I have had time to process this." Her tone made it clear the conversation was over. Christine sat stunned as her mom walked briskly from the room. The tears she had been holding back began to spill down her cheeks. She had hoped so desperately that her parents would understand. But now it was clear this wasn't something they were ready to accept. Wiping her eyes, Christine went to her bedroom and collapsed on the bed. She lay there crying quietly, sadness washing over her. After everything she had overcome to embrace her identity, her own parents couldn't support her. The rejection stung deeply. A soft knock at the door made Christine sit up quickly. Julia entered, her kind eyes immediately taking in the situation. "Oh, sweetie." She sat on the bed and pulled Christine into a hug. "I'm guessing it didn't go well with Mom?" Christine shook her head, a fresh wave of tears spilling out. "She got angry, Jules. She didn't even want to discuss it." Julia rubbed her back soothingly. "I'm so sorry, but you were so brave for telling her. This is new for them. It'll just take time." "But what if they never accept me?" Christine cried. "I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not." I know, Julia soothed. She stroked her sister's hair gently. They sat in pained silence for a few minutes. Christine wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. As painful as it was, she knew what she had to do. "I can't stay here right now," she said softly. "Not when I don't feel accepted." Julia nodded, her eyes full of empathy. "I understand. Do you have somewhere you can go?" Christine thought for a moment. Her closest friend Jess had mentioned before that her parents were progressive and open-minded. Maybe they would let her stay there for a bit. "I'm going to call Jess and see if I can stay with her family for a while," Christine decided. Julia agreed it was a good idea. Christine's hands shook as she dialed Jess's number. When her friend answered, Christine poured out the whole story, coming out to her parents, her mom's awful reaction, the unbearable thought of continuing to pretend to be a boy under their roof. "Can I please stay with you guys for a little while?" Christine finally asked, emotion making her voice crack. Just until things settle down here. Of course, Jess said without hesitation. I'll have to check with my parents, but I'm sure they'll say yes. I'll go ask them right now.
Christine breathed a sigh of relief. At least she had somewhere to turn while she figured things out.
Soon, Jess called back, confirming that her parents were totally on board. She and Julia packed a bag with the essentials: some changes of clothes, toiletries, and Christine's makeup kit. She took one last look around her bedroom, wondering when she'd be back here. It hurt to think her own home didn't feel welcoming right now.
Ready?
Julia asked gently. Christine nodded, swiping away a stray tear. Julia drove her across town to Jess's house. The warm hug Jess gave Christine when she arrived immediately lifted her spirits. Jess's parents welcomed her just as warmly. Over homemade lasagna, they made heartfelt toasts about their home always being open to those seeking support. Christine went to bed that night in Jess's cozy basement bedroom, feeling emotionally exhausted, but also cared for. She was touched by the lengths these kind strangers were willing to go for her well-being. Their compassion meant the world. The next morning, Christine came upstairs to the smell of waffles and coffee. Jess's parents greeted her brightly. It amazed Christine how at ease she felt with them right away. Over breakfast, they asked thoughtful questions about her transition so far, what names she'd like them to use, how to best support her. Christine got choked up realizing this was the acceptance she had craved from her own parents. Jess could tell it was emotional for her friend. "Hey, want to go for a walk?" she suggested. "We can check out the new frozen yogurt place." Christine agreed, eager for a distraction. As they walked to town, Jess chatted about light topics like school drama and celebrity gossip. Christine felt immensely grateful for her friend's ability to make her feel normal. Over heaping cups of yogurt, Christine opened up about how painful her mom's reaction had been. "I just wish she could understand that I haven't changed," she said sadly. "I'm still the same person inside." Jess reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Give her time," she said gently. "This is new for her too, but you being your true self is what matters most." Christine knew Jess was right, but it still hurt. She decided to try putting it out of her mind for now and just enjoy Jess's company. Over the next few days, Christine settled into a comfortable routine with Jess's family. During the day, she'd explore town with Jess or chat with her progressive mom about books and art. Evenings were full of home-cooked meals and board games by the fireplace. For the first time in ages, Christine felt totally free to be herself. Still, she missed her own family terribly. She kept hoping to hear from her parents, but her phone remained silent. On the fourth night since she'd left, Christine broke down crying after climbing into bed. Jess came and sat with her, handing over a box of tissues. "I know you miss them," she said sympathetically, "but I promise it'll work out eventually." Christine sighed shakily. "I hope you're right. I just wish I could fast forward to the part where they accept me." Jess gave a sad smile. "I know, but the waiting and uncertainty is part of your journey. You're so strong for going through this." Christine was grateful for Jess's endless support. She didn't know what she'd do without her right now. After a week of not hearing from her parents, Christine worked up the courage to call home. The phone rang several times before her mom finally answered. "Hello?" Hearing her mom's voice instantly brought tears to Christine's eyes. "Mom, it's me," she managed. A painful silence followed. When her mom finally spoke, her voice sounded strained. "Christine, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm staying at a friend's," Christine said softly. "I miss you guys, though." Her mom was quiet for a moment. "We miss you, too," she said, surprising Christine. "Things have been different around here without you?" Christine's heart lifted slightly. Maybe this meant her mom had been thinking about their conversation after all. "Could we talk soon?" Christine asked hesitantly. "I know this is hard, but I want to help you understand." Her mom let out a long breath. I suppose we do need to discuss it more. Your father is still processing everything. They made tentative plans for Christine to come home the next day after school so they could talk. Christine hung up feeling nervous, but a bit hopeful. When she arrived home the next afternoon, her mom greeted her with an uncertain hug. They sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with tension. Christine decided to start by asking her mom open-ended questions. When she first realized Christine felt different, if she had found their conversation helpful at all. She wanted to create a real dialogue. Her mom opened up a bit about her difficulty reconciling her child's transition. She had so many ingrained ideas about gender roles and norms, but Christine could tell she was making an effort to listen and understand. When her dad got home, the three of them talked more. He admitted to feeling blindsided and confused, but Christine focused on emphasizing her unchanged core self. It was a tentative first step, but so much better than the cold silence. When Christine left that evening, she felt cautiously optimistic about continuing the conversation. Maybe with time, her parents could truly know her. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.